Mental health professionals, what is something you wish more people knew? It's completely thankless. I worked at a group home for 15 years with both teens and adults. I can count on one hand the number of family members who thanked me for raising their kids or taking care of their brother. Don't forget low paying. My first job in the field started at $4.98 per hour, and that was working with teens at a long-term facility when I had a BS. When a kid would complain that I was only there for the money, I would laugh and tell them how much I actually made. Psych nurse here, please make an effort to learn about these illnesses and understand them. There is a taboo surrounding mental health that truly needs to go. It is so much more prevalent than anyone seems to want to admit. Also, if you feel sad, depressed, or worthless, see someone. You are worth so much more than you will ever see. I am a mental health nurse. I really wish people would understand that mental illness is a biological issue with the brain. No one judges a woman who has polycystic ovaries or a person with glaucoma. Why can't people understand the brain is an organ in the body? I hate the stigma our society puts on mental illness. People are afraid to get treatment because they don't want to get a mental illness diagnosis. I wish people would stop treating mental illness as a spectator sport where they can pick their favorite teams. You don't get to mourn and say, oh wow, that's really awful. There should be more awareness when a comedian you liked commits suicide and then a day later point and laugh at your local schizophrenic homeless person as they respond to their auditory hallucinations and yell at, apparently, no one. That counseling isn't only for crazy people. Many successful, normally functioning members of society seek counseling at some point in their lives for whatever reason, and that's fine. No one is stronger for not having gotten help. I just wish they felt more comfortable talking about this stuff. It's okay to be anxious, depressed, or feel crazy because of how stressed out you are. It's okay to admit that you need help or that you got yourself stuck in a rut. And it's okay to accept government support and welfare if you genuinely need it. I wish people understood more about different disorders. Just because you like things a certain way does not mean you have obsessive-compulsive disorder. Just because you can feel happy and then sad in the same day does not mean you have bipolar disorder. And just because my little sister is screaming and freaking out in public because she is overstimulated and having trouble expressing herself appropriately does not make her a spoiled brat. She has autism spectrum disorder. As someone who is in a master's program for mental health counseling and who works at a mental health hospital, I find most of the public has very limited knowledge and insight into mental health. That it's not illegal to be batshit crazy. It is not a crime to walk around talking to yourself. That's why the police can't just go around arresting people for doing that. If someone is psychotic, that's not a crime, and the court cannot issue a warrant to 5,150 a human in the US unless there is a crime committed or that individual is observed committing acts or making statements that endangered themselves or other people, or demonstrate a clear threat to themselves or other people. Furthermore, those with no benefits have to be in a state of true crisis to receive help willingly. So when you see someone acting psychotic, don't treat them like shit. They're probably terrified, lost, and no one can even help them until they commit a crime or become suicidal or homicidal. I'm about to start graduate studies in psychology, having completed my bachelor's in the same field. People don't realize how what they do say can actually cause hindrances in a person's treatment or adjustment back into their day-to-day life. E.g., enablers of addictive behaviors. Also, I can't read your mind. Don't forget to have compassion. I work in a mental health crisis center, and it's very easy for staff to get frustrated with clients who are acting out or refusing to engage and write them off as bad people, but I've found that I personally am unable to help someone if I try to engage with them from a mindset of frustration and having little hope that they can or will get better. Living with mental illness is a terrible thing, and the last thing those who are struggling need is another person to judge them, belittle them, or write them off. You never know what it's like to live with their illness, and every person has a different story no matter what their diagnosis might happen to be. Stress is normal. Anxiety is normal. Getting a little fluttery when you speak in public or are thrown into social situations is normal. I think people self-diagnose so often that it really undermines what true anxiety is like. Mental health meds don't work like cough medicine. You can't just take one pill and be better right away. Often antidepressants take time to build up in your system, so if it's only been a week and you aren't feeling better, give it more time. Also, if you stop taking your meds suddenly, you're probably going to feel like shit. Let your doctor know if you want to stop taking them and they will taper you down. Oh, and just because you tell me you're suicidal doesn't mean I'm sending cops to your house to take you to the state hospital. Being honest is the best way to get you the help you need. It's okay to be scared, but we want to help you. Nurse here. Mental illness is an illness like any other, i.e. cancer, diabetes. You can go through periods where you are totally symptom-free remission, and there will be times you need to seek help. I always remind my patients that they wouldn't be ashamed of seeking help for a physical illness, so why the shame in addressing a mental health issue? So many people mistake being OCD with being anal retentive. Anal retentive is when a person is excessively orderly and fussy. They are usually picky about how things need to be done, perfectionists, and obsessively neat and organized. They hate surprises or changes to routine. Anal retentive issues rarely have a negative impact on the person's ability to complete daily activities. Obsessive-compulsive disorder is a disorder of the brain and behavior. OCD causes severe anxiety in those affected and involves both obsessions and compulsions that take a lot of time and get in the way of important activities the person values. OCD usually interferes with regular daily activities in a detrimental way. I have lots of experience specific to eating disorder treatment work. In my last year with the company, I was asked to work with a more acute unit. It was interesting, and I learned a lot about myself and my own compassion and boundary balance game. There is so much about working in mental health that can't be taught. It really comes down to temperament, experience, and then education. I've worked with many idiots with advanced degrees who end up letting patients run the show because they don't know how to gently and firmly lead. My best advice to anyone working in the field or anyone living with family friends with mental illness is to take good care of yourself, do your own psychological work, you need a process space too. And try like hell to maintain a part of yourself that is tender. I'm working on recovery from an eating disorder. I've been through countless rounds of inpatient and weight restoration, and I'm only just starting to get a handle on all this. Thank you for everything. Ooh. The uninformed public makes me sad. Misusing our terminology and all that. Overall, I'd say the public needs to know that we're not just here when you're sick and when you're in crisis. We're also here to help you before it gets to code red. My mom's a clinical psychologist. She is generally unhappy with the fact that in the US, even if you have insurance, there is no place to go for quality treatment for long periods of time. We need more, better mental health services. It is actually very unlikely that someone with a mental health disorder will hurt someone else. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, particularly with someone with paranoid thoughts, etc., but I truly believe that the media makes it seem like everyone with a mental health disorder is violent. Furthermore, when they are violent, is it much more common that they are a threat to themselves, rather than others? I'm not practicing, I just have a BA in psych, but this is still basic undergrad material. From what I've studied, it seemed like people with mental illnesses are far more likely to be hurt by others, rather than to hurt people themselves. Psych. Nurse. We can't read minds. I only know what people are willing to share with me. It's frustrating that people become weary when they believe they are being somehow telepathically scrutinized. If you don't click well with your therapist, you are allowed to seek and/or ask for a new therapist. A good therapist will try to help to work out what the relationship with them was lacking. Also, for friends, family and so's of mental health professionals, sometimes this job can get so hard that you need to hibernate for a while, trying not to take it personally if I don't want to talk about work, if I need a night alone, if I ask for something special for myself. Part of surviving in this field is self-care. As a neuropsychologist, I want everybody to know that a concussion is not going to give you lifelong cognitive problems. Please ignore ESPN, etc. when they talk about concussions. Also, if you're under the age of 65, it is very likely that the memory problems you're having are normal and not Alzheimer's disease or some other form of dementia. This isn't exactly related to mental health, but as a social worker, I hate the stigma that I'm there to take your kids. I don't even work for child protection, there are so many other ways I can try and help. Most of the positions require a master's degree, but the pay doesn't justify the cost of getting one. I'd love to be a licensed counselor or social worker, but I'd only get a 5-8K increase to what I'm making now. I wish my 10 years experience in a variety of different fields, addiction, prison, elderly, hospitals, counted as much as someone with a 6-mo internship and a shiny master's degree from Phoenix University. Currently work in a locked mental health facility. I'd want people to know that the patients we get through here are not monsters. They're just people who are struggling to deal with something, typically trauma, in a healthy way. Most often, they have significant barriers to leading a safe, healthy life. They are not defined by their history or diagnoses. They're people with many facets, just like you. Master's level clinical social worker here. If you are a parent interested in therapy for your young child, expect to be actively participating in the treatment. Parents can often see therapy as a place they take their child to get fixed, when in fact the true work usually needs to take place within the context of a child-caregiver relationship. And homework between sessions, take it seriously. The work you do outside the session is just as important as the work you do in the session. How hard it is for people with mental illnesses to sort of re-enter the world. It's super tough. Funding gets cut when you get a job, but finding a place to live stalls out, and oh shit, you're back at the beginning, for example. And I've seen people from all walks of life. We are all literally only a few steps away from being in the situation I see my clients in, and that many people look down on people for being in. Maybe it's a couple paychecks. Maybe it's family support. But we are all closer to being in a tough situation than we would probably like to think about. No one is exempt. I have a question for you all. Can you fear schizophrenia and not have it? Lately I've been fearing it, and when I hear noises I have to make sure they are real. It's giving me a lot of anxiety, sad face, like a shit ton. I also get way inside my head sometimes. Exercising helps. I am diagnosed with PTSD. 6 times in IRQ and AFG. I don't want it to define me and live a very normal life. I talked to a guy once as part of the VA evil process. He had me lie down on the floor and talk to me for 10 minutes about how to breathe differently. So, I just have a touch of anxiety and aren't very patient. There are a couple of other little things that I wouldn't mind figuring out how to cope with. Alas, I decided I'd never go back. A shame, since it's free for as long as I like. Not my bag, baby. Semi-related, that psychologist does not equal clinician or therapist. Yes, I'm getting a master's degree in psych, and hopefully a PhD after that. No, I'm not going to talk to people about their feelings while they lay on a couch for the rest of my life. It's already been noted how incredibly inaccurate that vision is anyway. I'll be fiddling with numbers and tests, thank you very much. Psychology is a huge field. It's not just therapists. I was diagnosed with schizophrenia a year ago, and I see a therapist every week. Thing is, I don't know how to talk about it or what to talk about. I thought the therapist would have a conversation seed or something to talk from, but for the most part one just sit there and listen to him ramble about his own life. It's a common misconception that everyone who studies psychology is a counselor or therapist. I personally am pursuing a master's in applied psychological research and foresee myself working for either a hospital, research center, or university or college in the future. I want to help people, but I have learned through experience that a career in therapy would be detrimental to my own mental health, as I am incredibly empathetic and experience burnout from other people's emotions very quickly. It's a difficult, thankless, low-paying, for having a BA, MSW, or MA, not sure about PhD, job. I have been a social worker for many years. I love it. But I wish we were compensated for the difficult work we do. I have also lived overseas for several years. Social workers in many countries Europe are not paid the crap wages that Americans in the same field are paid. I wish we had a wage that reflective of our experience and education. I used to work in mental health. I had a lot of neighbors of the group home where I work demand I kick out residents that they didn't like. Legally I cannot evict people just because they are not pleasant to be around. People have a constitutional right to be assholes. There's a bias in our culture against the psychological and toward the physical. Psychological, social and emotional phenomena are real. It's interesting that things like brain scans illustrate some biological underpinnings of psychological phenomena, but they aren't necessary to validate the legitimacy of the human experience. Pet peeve is the statement that goes something like, depression isn't in your head, we now know that it's in your brain. Worked at a rehab for 5 years. It's hard to turn it off. When we hang out I don't want to talk about work. I hang out to get my mind off of work. I'm not here to fix your friends and family. Give me a break. Psychologist. The one thing that hinders the most would be people expect black and white yes or no answers to everything. But anything you know enough about is always too complex to be put into a nice little easy box. I feel like I have to say, it's complicated to almost every question I get now, but what kind of answer is that to give? It makes things complicated, uneasy face. Peer counseling can be as important as medications. Not to say one replaces the other, but there is a popular misconception that meds fix someone. Even on meds that are working, patients experience symptoms and side effects. Peer counseling allows a person to talk to someone who has been through the same experiences and come out the other side. It is a critical part of wellness and recovery for many people. Former CRS, Certified Recovery Specialist, also known as a peer recovery specialist. Basically a type of counselor with a diagnosis of their own. My biggest hurdle when dealing with clients was the stigma that any medication will make you stop being you or not be worth it. So many people, especially parents of clients, were so reluctant to try medication because they thought it would sap the personality from their children. Make them zombies, is what I heard a lot. Meds have come so far from the days of personality-draining pharmaceuticals. If you have the right doctor who knows their stuff, you won't end up a zombie. Definitely. You shouldn't lie. That's just counterproductive. Also, counseling should be free. I live in Canada, we have that dope as health care. But it would be nice if people are entitled to at least a few sessions a year. Counseling has helped me tremendously. How often triggers completely translational? Like, a rape in a movie triggering a rape victim? I know someone who had triggers, and her big ones were bruises and the fabric design on the couch where it happened, and no number of trigger warnings would have helped her. This is so weird. I was just thinking about an hour ago that I ought to direct a post to therapists on AskReddit about the phenomenon of otherkin, though I didn't know the term for it offhand. Thanks for saving me the trouble. Smiley face. What's your thought on someone whose natural state of being is completely incongruent with a modern industrialized society? In other words, you have to completely medicate them or hijack their natural personality in order to make them a productive citizen, but at the expense of their true personality characteristics and happiness. Maybe I'm a little off here, but I think some people are just naturally incompatible with modern society and will never be happy. As someone who suffers severe depression and anxiety, thank you. Your very first bullet point struck me so. I was so lucky that this last week I could tell my boss I was having a panic attack and needed to work from home. She was understanding and, rather than being annoyed, asked what I needed. My parents have been my biggest supporters in getting the help I need over the last 10 years. It's also amazing to me how much crossover and differences there can be in symptoms between illness or two people with the same illness. It makes me realize naming something as complex as mental issues can be pretty useless. I've taken many psychology classes and I'm still confused by the difference between psychopath and sociopath. Like, I just took a juvenile offender class and we read articles that specifically said they could be used interchangeably. In another class, a different professor said that sociopaths are made while psychopaths are born, but another professor said that was wrong. So much conflicting information. After the death of his grandmother, my really good friend was floundering. He didn't know how to handle a loss as monumental as that of his grandmother. He started going to therapy. His therapist no-showed for one of his appointments. He was not impressed. The next session she told him that she felt he had abandonment issues and that is why she no-showed. To teach him that even if someone isn't there at one time doesn't mean they won't be there overall. I could not figure that one out at all. He stopped going to her after that. I have generalized anxiety, and anytime anyone asks me for my opinion on how to get a handle on their anxiety, I tell them start with therapy, but please remember that not every therapist is for everyone. If you feel your therapist or doctor is not right for you, try someone else. I have this innate fear that me leaving my current doctors will cause them to make notes in my files that I'm faking or a pill chaser or something. It's quite aggravating when it feels like your physicians are more of a business than a safe place to seek help. Uneasy face. My personal anecdotal experience of a psychiatric care facility was that the psychiatrists were actually very compassionate and competent, but the non-MD therapists weren't terribly good at their jobs, though still trying to help, and the nursing staff ranged from indifferent to mocking and hostile. Luckily for me, my problems were mainly of the brain chemistry variety rather than due to trauma upbringing, so getting meds figured out was 90+% of the solution. But I feel deeply sorry for the fellow patients who desperately needed good therapy to help them solve their issues and weren't getting it. Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.